people don't really care about your story at first. All they really care about is how you can help them. How can you give them how can you solve their problem? What people usually do is they start the story about them or about their business, but in fact, it should be about the customer. And we call that the character of the story. And so our job in business especially is to help our customers become the hero. And here's how we do it.
Hello and welcome to Along the Way Life's Journey. I'm your host, Carl Buccellato. As I've told you many times, I've traveled millions of miles around this beautiful earth of ours, and I've met wonderful, wonderful people. And my endeavor here on this program is to bring you people who can give you information, education, and hopefully inspiration. Tell you a little bit about their lives and how life has changed to get bigger and better in many cases. And I have just a man here with us today. His name is Jay Owen. And Jay is the owner of a program called Business Builders. It's a very successful program that he created in 1999 when he was only 17 years old. So he had a head start on most of us. So Jay, welcome to our show. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Carl, thanks for having me.
You know, this is an inspiring story. 17 years old to create a business that's still in business 25, 26 years later. That's amazing. Tell us a little bit.
Yeah, I started really young. I've always kind of had that entrepreneurial spirit. Some people ask, is it nature or nurture? And I think it's a little bit of both. My grandfather ran a restaurant chain for years and sold it. My uncle ran an insurance company. And I didn't really want to work in either one of their businesses necessarily, but although I had a brief stint in my uncle's, but that's another story. But I always wanted to start my own thing. So, my first business, if you will, was pulling a little red wagon around a concession ballpark when I was about 8. And then I started a lawn business when I was, like a lot of boys, when I was 12. And started this business that I still run today, 26 years later, when I was 17. To be fair, we only made about $5,000 that first year. But when you're 17, you don't need to make much money.
17 years old, $5,000 is a lot of money.
No doubt.
I admire that because you're talking to a man who never had a job in his life. Never. I've always been in business. I've created businesses. I've created businesses that have employed thousands of people, but I never had a job. I've always signed the front of the paycheck, one of those people. So I respect what that means and what you've done. And I also see on your bio that you were listed a number of times by Inc. magazine in the Fortune 5,000 list. That's quite an achievement.
Yeah, that's they recognize companies, the fastest growing companies in the world. We hit that 2 years in a row. Although I will say, I don't think fastest growing is always the best thing. Sometimes when you're going really fast, you can make big mistakes. Yeah. I'm historically more of a slow growth kind of guy. I'm into just being a little bit better than we were last year. And I figure if we're just a little bit better than we were last year, if I'm personally just a little bit better than I was last year, then that's pretty good.
I love that theory because I believe in it. I think that if you recognize the value of compounded increasing, you have great success, and it usually identifies mistakes before they become so paramount that you can't do much about them. You can cut them off in the brink.
Yeah, I always tell people too, the other thing I always say is, when a company or a person or a life is moving really fast and you crash, it's like a car moving really fast. It has a real damage effect. But if you're moving a little bit slower and you crash, you can adjust and kind of move from there.
Put on some new fenders and get going again.
That's right.
Okay, so tell us a little about you. You just said that you had an entrepreneurial family. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? Tell us a little bit about that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I was born in Albany, Georgia, when I was a kid. Hence my slight Southern accent. And then we moved to Jacksonville, Florida, not long after. So I've lived in Florida most of my life. I'm not a true Florida native, but about as close as most people are. And then we moved to St. Augustine when I was a kid. I was homeschooled from about kindergarten to 5th grade. Then went into a great public school system here in St. Johns County, one of the best in the state, and had some great experiences there. And started my business when I was in school as a teenager, like I said. And then I got married really young, had kids really young. My wife and I got married when I was 21, she was 20. And actually today, as of the time we're recording this, is our 22nd wedding anniversary. So
congratulations. That's a milestone. You should be very pleased with that.
Yeah, we've officially been married longer than we've not been married. So that's kind of fun.
I understand that. I'm an old codger, So I've been longer than I've been alive in many situations. Matter of fact, I probably have shoes older than you. So, I say that jokingly, but I moved to Florida in 1974. Can you imagine? From New York, moved out to Florida, started businesses, and I started some very successful businesses and had the opportunity to travel throughout Europe. And in 1981, I was in Switzerland for a black and white affair, and didn't have a pair of formal shoes. I had the tuxedo and all the accoutrement, but the formal shoes never made it into the bag. And I went into Bally Shoes and bought a pair of formal shoes in 1981 that I just wore on that ship last week. All that time, they're still around.
Wow.
Good
That's
shoes,
funny.
good, which means that if you buy quality
That's
and
right.
you take care of it, it would last, So tell us a little bit about this business, because you have now a podcast and you've interviewed hundreds of successful businessmen, leaders in the business industry. Tell us what you do and how it comes about.
Sure. I always say marketing can be confusing and expensive. We help make it clear and effective so people can get attention and grow their businesses or organizations or nonprofits. We work with all kinds of different people. It's noisier out there than ever. We've got more people, trying to advertise to us, connect with us, communicate with us, and so we help people really clarify their message so that they can actually get people to pay attention and invite their customers into a story, so that they can grow their businesses. So it's a really good time.
So, folks, I know while you're watching this, you're thinking to yourself, well, let me make some notes. This guy could help me a lot. Don't bother with the notes. All of the contact information will be in the show notes. You'll have places to reach him, links to click on, and I'm sure he'll be able to answer all your questions and show you how you can make your business bigger and better. Well, because that's, after all, what you're about, right? Helping people grow their businesses.
That's right.
I appreciate that. And I have a little experience with Inc. magazine myself. So, I know what that is. In 1986, Inc. magazine named a company that I had started 5 years prior to that in what was formerly a subs shop, a little 1,000 square foot sandwich shop. And we started it with a few dollars. And 6 years later, they named us the 12th fastest growing independent company in America. So I understand.
Well, I was only 4 years old at that point, so
Well, I was a bit older than that.
Well, that's incredible.
Yeah, it was a great experience, and I had the good fortune of being blessed by God to take that company public, and I sold it off and got lazy, said I'm going to retire. I was much too young, had to come back again, do it all over again. So I actually had that experience 3 separate times, where I built major businesses, international businesses, brought them public. And then at the age of 78, my wife said to me, enough already, retire. So I retired, and that was 5 years ago. And I wrote a book, and the book became very popular. As a matter of fact, I got the book right here. My publicist says I'm supposed to talk about this more on the show because this is what pays for the show, the royalties from this book. Okay, this is To Every Page is Turning. And it became an Amazon bestseller. So I'm just one of those guys who's had that kind of life, life where it could have ended 100 times. And the bleakest of times, you think that it's all over, that little ray of sunshine, and God's light chips in on me. And here I am doing a podcast.
What a great story.
When I did that book and they had me on TV shows, the publicist said, you're pretty natural on TV. Why don't you do a podcast? And I said, I don't know what a podcast is. I really didn't. So here I am, hundreds of shows later, many, many people like you. And I just love it because it gives me a chance to meet people like you, hear your stories, bring it to other people so they could benefit from it. And that's my vision.
It's funny because you said you retired, but really you haven't stopped finding a way to get things done. And I always tell people, retirement's such a funny thing. Like whoever invented the idea, especially people who are Christians, like there's really not any mention of retirement in the Bible. And I always tell people, it's really interesting if you pay attention at the very beginning of the Bible. In Genesis, God gave man work to do before the fall. God gave man work to do before things went wrong. And that means that work is not inherently wrong. It just can be a little messy this side of heaven. Right. And so the question becomes, how do we make it the best we can possibly be for everybody that's around us?
And I believe that what he meant by that as well is if we do our jobs and we continue to focus on our job and to give grace to him, then things won't fall.
Yeah.
They fall because we take our eye off the ball. We get distracted into all the secular things in the world that seem to be important at the time. And I know it's important to build big businesses. I know it's important to be successful. I just came from a meeting with the men from my church. We have a luncheon on a Thursday with a pastor, and we have this round table thing where we talk. And we were just talking about that same thing. It isn't a matter of whether you're affluent and have succeeded in life. That's not the issue. Those are the gifts that God gives us in order to be successful in life. It's what we do with it, how we treat other people, how we make it purposeful in life. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent here. Tell us more about your business.
Well, we've been around, like you said, for 26 years, and we get to work with all kinds of different organizations all around the world. One of the biggest things that changed in marketing for us that might be helpful for people that are listening who run businesses is probably about 8 years ago, I read a book by a guy named Donald Miller, and the book was called Building a Story Brand. And we reworked how we interact with businesses by starting with telling the right story. Now, the mistake people make is they think that the story that needs to be told is their story. They want to tell their story about their business. But the reality is, and you know this because you've been in business a long time and had many successful growth years, people don't really care about your story at first. All they really care about is how you can help them. How can you give them how can you solve their problem? And so when we rework the messaging around this story brand framework, what we've seen is people, in many cases, double their incoming qualified leads because they are getting the right story out there, and the story is focused on the customer. And I'd be happy to unpack that or talk through it if you think it's helpful to your guests. But
Sure,
basically,
of course, of course.
well, I'll give you kind of an overview because it might be helpful for folks to think about. And actually, it's good whether you run a business or not. It's good in personal relationships. It's good to think about in communication. But here's the simple 7 steps to the framework. Okay. What people usually do is they start the story about them or about their business, but in fact, it should be about the customer. And we call that the character of the story. And really, all movies operate like this too. There's a primary character who's a hero, but at the beginning, they're not a hero. They have to go through some kind of transformation to become that hero. And so, our job in business, especially, is to help our customers become the hero. And here's how we do it. Number one, we ask, what does the customer want? What is the outcome they're trying to achieve? So, for example, if I sold insurance, nobody really wants insurance. In fact, we'd rather not have it if we didn't have to. But we get insurance because we want peace of mind. We want security. We want to protect our assets. We want to protect people that we love or things that we care about. And then we ask the question, once we know what they want, is what problem do they have? What is the problem that's preventing them from getting what they want? And we talk about that in 3 ways. The external problem that's the most clear and obvious, the internal problem, which is how they feel about it. And then sometimes people in business to business or business to industry will go, well, Jay, it's not about feelings for us. It's about dollars and cents. And I'm like, that's not really true. People buy things because of how they feel about it.
That's right.
And then the last is the philosophical problem. What do they believe as a result of it? And then we get to introduce the client who's serving that customer. We call it the guide. And they have 2 things for that customer. And you've probably done this over the years and not even known it. Empathy for that customer. In other words, hey, we understand what you're experiencing. And they have authority to help them solve the problem. They've done it before. They've got experience. They've won awards. They've served other people, whatever it may be. Then we give them a clear plan. That's step number 4. And in the clear plan, we give them 3 steps to work with us. Do this, do that, and do this. And then you'll see a successful outcome. We call them to action. That's step number 5. And then ultimately, we help them avoid failure. That's number 6. And we help them achieve success. And when we write all that down in literally a 1-page story brand messaging framework, it totally changes the outcome of all other marketing activities. I don't care whether they're printing a flyer, doing a radio commercial, doing a TV commercial, updating their website, sending out social media posts. If they have that messaging up front and it's all focused around what does my customer want, what problem do they have, and how do I help them overcome it, it changes everything about the outcomes. In fact, the time that I knew, hey, this is something we need to put in the business and use for our clients, is I read the book and I thought, this seems really good. We should try it ourselves because I like to guinea pig things on us before I take them to customers. We did it for ourselves and we literally doubled our incoming qualified leads just by changing the text on our homepage. And I thought, we should do this for everybody. And so now we won't build a website. We won't do a social media campaign. We won't create a TV commercial until we've created that story brand messaging up front. And when we do, it changes everything about the growth factor and the success for that customer.
That's great advice. Great advice. I should talk to you off screen about how I could change my podcast here and get it more productive.
For sure. Happy to.
Because it's great advice. I use it to have my voice, but I also wanted to reach as many people as possible. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Yeah. So Inc. Magazine, podcast for hundreds of individuals, and wife and five children. Five children.
5 kids. Yeah.
My goodness, you're a busy man. Okay. and they're all teenagers or close
Pretty
to
much,
it.
yep. My youngest daughter is 12, and then my oldest son is 20. So that's the range of them. And we had our oldest one just a couple years after we got married. So we'd been married, I guess, a year or two when we first had him. And it's wild to have adults. My second son will be 18 in a couple of months here. So they're quickly moving from childhood to teenagers to adults faster than I can count.
It's the blink of an eye before you know it.
It seems to move faster as they get older.
Before you know it, yeah. The blink of an eye. So I'm sure they're all the older ones are focusing on where they're going to go to school. And you're thinking about whether they should be coming into the business or your legacy approach. And, because that's part of what growing a big business is about.
That's right.
Giving opportunities for your children.
Yeah, it's interesting. My oldest one, he's in college now. He goes to Liberty University up in Virginia, and he's having an incredible time. He is a worship leader, and he is on an incredible team up there called The Collective. He actually gets to lead worship sometimes a couple times a week in an arena with about 10 to 15,000 students.
Wow. That's
and
wonderful.
It is the largest weekly gathering of Christian college students in the world. Which is pretty awesome. And then my second son, Oliver, he's not really the college type. He's a little bit more of the entrepreneur. And I'm recording an in-person podcast here right after I get off of this virtual podcast in our studio. And he's helping me set up that studio now. So he's going to be helping out. He's already helping out a lot in the business. We'll see where he ends up. And then the younger three, who knows? They've got plenty of talents and abilities that God's given them, and I just hope that they'll use them for good and ultimately just be kind people that care for their community.
I love listening to you because I love when I hear a parent, especially a father, who understands his responsibility to his children, his Christian responsibility to his children, to provide them with foundations and faith and opportunity. And recognize that the work of their hands is important. So many kids you see out there today. I did a program recently with the founder of Reliance University, and it's a new university that's founded in Texas, with the idea that what's been happening in the academia across the country has been a disgrace to the next generation. We have allowed our generations to be robbed from us because they don't understand ethics. They don't understand the history of the country. They don't understand values. They've been taught that Judeo-Christian values don't really have any merit and in that part of our country, when all of that is not so. The foundation of this country is, I believe, what you and I believe in. The foundation comes from that, and it's important for us to go out and make sure that our voice is heard. So that's continued. I'm doing a program in a couple of weeks with the dean of Covenant College in Tennessee.
I've got some friends whose kids go there, actually.
Yeah, it's great school, and they have a great division for what they want to do in education. So
it's a beautiful area up there in Chattanooga as well.
Oh yeah, really, really lovely. Yeah. Not quite as good as where I grew up in Brooklyn, but pretty nice. You said you were born in the South. I don't know if you could tell from my voice, but I was born in the South also. I was born in South Brooklyn. So.
Yeah, not quite the same. It's funny. I never think that I have that much of a Southern accent, but whenever I go to New York or Massachusetts, people are always like, oh, you must be from the South. And I'm like, look, I'm from South Georgia, and people over there talk a lot more like this. That's what Southern accent sounds like to me. And so I don't feel like I naturally have that much of a Southern twang, but I get called out when I go to the North. So,
well, you know what? It's interesting to listen to different voices and dialects. And as I said in my opening, I've traveled all over the world. I really have millions of miles around the world. And one of the things I found out is no matter how you speak and no matter what you look like and no matter where you come from, it's what's inside of you that counts. And we're all the same people. When you bleed us, it's all red blood.
For sure.
So, so what is on your agenda coming up? Any major events or any activities that you have going on that you'd like people to know about?
Yeah, we got a bunch of things going on. First, I would say if people out there are curious to get more about that messaging framework that I just talked about, we just built out a 5-part video series. It's completely free. So if people want to get access to that, I've got a way for them to do that. They go to storybrandcourse.com, storybrandcourse.com. They just put their email address in. They'll get access to this 5-part video series that hopefully be really helpful in them growing their business. And then another group that I really enjoy a lot, I run a group called Agency Builders, and basically it's a bunch of other people who run businesses like mine. And a couple years ago, I was at an event with a couple of guys, and we were sitting around at an Airbnb having a glass of bourbon in the evening, just talking about life. And we're going, we need more of this. Like, how do we create more of this? And I said, well, let's just create our own event. I live down in Florida. People like to come to Florida. We'll do it like early in the spring when it's still, snowing everywhere else and it's nice here. And so we started that 5 years ago. And every March, so actually about a month from now, as of the time of this recording, we're doing an agency builders retreat, which is just a lot of fun. And so I would just encourage people, regardless of my event, to get in community. This is one of the things I wish I had done when I was younger, is just get around like-minded people and different-minded people too, who will challenge your thinking. And a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners, especially, end up feeling lonely at the top, if you will. And because, like you said earlier, there's something different about the fact when you sign the front of a paycheck. There just is. And until you know what it is like to sweat over making payroll on any given week and to stay up all night trying to solve for that, you just don't know what it's like. In the same way that somebody who's never had a child just doesn't know what it's like to have a child. The level of burden and responsibility is just, it's unfathomable until you put it on your shoulders. And so I just encourage people to get in community, to be around people who will encourage them, challenge them, and also go, yeah, that really sucks. I've been through that too. And I'm sorry you're dealing with that. But if you just keep moving forward, you'll get out of it. The way to get out of a valley is to keep walking.
The mentor value is very important.
Yeah.
But the fellowship issue, when you're with your peers, people who have gone through it, that's what many of the addiction programs are built on, leaning on one another, coming out of that thing, recognizing that there's a higher power, but there's also a real person sitting next to you that's already lived through it and experienced it, that you can share experience with. Very important.
That's right. I always say, one of the things I talk about a lot is I think there's 4 kind of people that everybody needs to have in their life. And the first is somebody to look up to. That's the mentor that you're talking about. It's somebody who has gone before you, somebody who can go, yeah, I've been there before. So everybody needs somebody to look up to. And I believe the second is what you're talking about, which is fellowship. Everybody needs somebody to stand beside them. They need people that are shoulder to shoulder, walking in life together. They got kids about the same age. They got marriages about the same number of years. They got businesses the same number of years. And then everybody needs somebody to look up, somebody that's looking up to them. I think that one of the greatest opportunities any of us have, I don't care if you're 12 or 85, we all have something to teach somebody else. And the opportunity to do that helps make us stronger in the process, and it passes the torch along. And then the last, one of the things we talked about before recording was like pivotal moments in life where things changed. And I believe the fourth is that you need somebody that believes in you when you don't believe in yourself. Yeah. And for me, early in my business career, if you could even call it that, I just gotten married. I wasn't making very much money, probably $25,000 a year at the most. And we were struggling to make ends meet. We just gotten married, and my uncle needed help in his insurance business. And I thought I could probably do insurance. He needed an exit plan. I needed an entry plan. I wasn't making very much money. He had 2 houses and a nice black Mercedes. And I thought, I'd like to have that. And so I went to work with him. And I learned more about business in those 6 months of listening to him on calls and going to meetings with him than I ever could have in any school. But I also knew that that's not what I was made for. And I remember I went home one day and sat with my wife, and I was crying because I'm a bit of a crier. And I said, babe, I could do this and I think I could make a lot of money. Um, but I also think I'm going to hate it. And I don't think it's what I'm made for. And she said, so quit and do what you love and I'll support you. And that was the moment where I knew I'd married the right woman.
Yeah.
I'd hoped I'd married the right woman before that, but that was the moment where I knew I married the right woman. And we've only gone up and to the right since then. I went in the next morning, told my uncle, hey, I'm not made for this. I love you. And I'm so thankful for this time. It's been a game changer for me. But I'm made to chart my own course. That's what God made me to do. And that was the time where I said, I'm going to go all in. And whether I blow the thing up or one way or the other, blow it up successfully or blow it up and it's a failure, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do it until I either crash or succeed. And thanks to God, it has only gone up from then. And that early years of making a few $1,000s now for years has been a multi-million-dollar agency that I love to be at. I love the people here. I love what we get to do. I love our clients. It's a fun time. And I think, gosh, a lot of people don't get to say that about work. A lot of people dread Mondays, and I don't. And I don't want that for my teams either.
You know that old saying that says, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life?
Exactly.
And I believe that. And you're very blessed that you were able to see that, that your destiny was not bound to just the affluent return, but you had to have peace and satisfaction about what you were doing as well.
That's right. That's right.
And folks, I'm sure it wasn't just easy. You know, you don't just leave something
No.
that has a promise and go into something you got to build from nothing, from scratch, without bumps and falling down and scrapes on your knees and, you know, doing all the things you have to do to survive. I'm sure you went through all that stuff.
For sure.
We none of us get to a point of success without hard work. And sometimes, I can remember similar situation to what you're talking about, having a family and laying awake at night and saying to myself, I started this venture. I put all the money we had into starting it up and nothing was coming in. And I had to pay the staff, was small staff at the time, but they got paid even if I didn't, and I'm looking up at the ceiling and I'm saying, did I do the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? And, it's scary, but you get that sense of peace inside of you when you know that you're where God wants you to be.
100%.
Sense of peace. It's a wonderful feeling. So, ladies and gentlemen, what you're hearing here is an old man and a young man telling you the same story. That if you have a vision and you have a talent and a gift that God has given you and a purpose, never defy it. Drive to it. Go after it, because it's the difference between Saul on his horse, who knew all the miracle things that the Jews were telling him about, and striking him almost blind, and becoming Paul with the recognition that God lived and Christ was real. And it's a difference in your life between knowing when you're on the right path, you're doing what you're supposed to do. And I think that's an important part of what we have to talk about here today.
Yeah, and the thing about that story too, when you think about Paul in the Bible, for people who don't know that story, Paul was, a very successful, very powerful, very smart guy. He was a Jewish leader. He had money, he had power, he had influence, he had knowledge and education. And honestly, from the time that he committed his life to Christ, arguably from a worldly perspective, his life only got worse. It did not get better.
Yeah, right.
And yet he was still doing what he was called to do. I think a lot of times people make this mistake and they think, if I'm doing what God has for me, then my life's only going to get better and God will never put roadblocks in. And I'm like, Christians, we should read our Bibles, because that's
right.
not usually what happens to people. It's actually often very hard, and that's okay.
Right.
But that's also why we need to be getting community, and we weren't meant to be alone.
That's right. That's why community and church attendance and membership and fellowship is so important, to recognize that we're not alone, 100%. And that when we walk together for a common goal, good comes out of it. Sometimes it's hard to see the good, but it's there. There's good in there all the time.
That's right.
I have a little statue back here, and that represents something to me, because every day I walk around and I have 2 coins in my pocket. I just dropped one of them, so I won't pick it up. But here's the other one. It's exactly the same. It's in a little plastic bag. And this coin, if you can see it, is the armament of God. And I find somebody every day. God brings me to a person to give this to. and I tell them what it needs. And every day they seem to understand the value of it. And I have given it to people all over the world. And I can't tell you how many times I go into a restaurant with a friend who equally has the coin in his pocket. And a server will come over and slap the coin on the table, and I'll slap mine, and my friend will slap his down. And occasionally we've been at a restaurant with somebody at another table who I've never met before comes over with a coin and slaps it down. So it's been moving along, you know.
That's very cool.
But the purpose is very simple. That if you arm yourself with the armament of God every day, give thanks for it, your life will be directional. Anyway, I'm getting off the course again. That's what happens when you talk to an old man, Jay, you know.
Well, I appreciate you calling me a young man, because most days I feel like an old one. So I appreciate you giving me a little encouragement there.
Well, you're certainly a young man. You got your whole future ahead of you, and a lot ahead of you. I have grandsons older than your sons. I have a great-grandson, believe it or not, who's 21 years old. A great-grandson.
Wow, that's incredible.
So, you know,
what a legacy.
You got a long way ahead of you to do many things for success and to bring inspiration to people.
I hope so.
So we've got about just a few minutes because we're already at the 2:40 mark. So let me ask you: I'm going to give you a few minutes to say anything you'd like, and then I'm going to do a wrap.
Yeah, I mean, I've said a lot of things I would focus on for people out there, regardless of what they're up to. Get the right people around you, you know, somebody to look up to, somebody to stand beside you, somebody who's looking up to you, and somebody who believes in you and you don't believe in yourself. For me, that's my wife. Focus on the things that matter. I think a lot of times, especially when I was younger, you get so caught up in thinking like, once I'm done with this project, then I'll spend time with my marriage, or once I'm done with this project, then I'll spend time with my kids, or once I'm done with this project. And what you find is there's always another project to work on. And so, you know, I always remind people it's good to rest. I say that to myself as much to anybody, because I'm a bit of a workaholic for sure. And yet I'm reminded that God rested. He didn't need to. He wasn't tired. You know, he's all powerful and all knowing and all present. He doesn't need to rest. Why did he rest? He rested to give an example to us. That's right. I remind people that Jesus in the Bible, you know, he often went away by himself to pray and to rest. And often people bothered him and woke him up, you know, which is the life of having a bunch of kids too. But he didn't necessarily have kids. We had a bunch of disciples, which is sometimes the same. And so I would say take time to rest, get the right people around you, get in community. And then for people who are growing businesses, you know, check out that StoryBrand course that I mentioned because it really can be transformational in your business growth.
I think that's great news, great advice. I'm reminded as you speak of the old song, Cats in the Cradle.
Yeah.
And, you know, our children grow up before you realize it. So it's very important for us to spend time with them and to give them not only the leadership, but the affection and the tenderness that we can give. It can only come from a parent. Outside world is out to crush them. We have to guide that.
That's right.
So I thank you so much for being on this program today. It's been very exciting to hear all your success. And ladies and gentlemen, I encourage you to reach out. This story notes, as I said, all the contact information. There's a wealth of help and information here for you. Make it happen for whatever you need. As Jay said, it doesn't have to only be for business, for your personal things, for what you're doing in life. And I tell you what I tell you every week over here. You have your own story. I know everybody has a story. You heard mine and Jay's today, kind of mixed together. It's supposed to be his, but as usual, I stuck my 2 cents in. So you heard my story and Jay's today. But you have a story, and your story is very important. Tell it to the people you love. Write it down. Submit it to the newspaper or the local television network. Get your information and your story out, because that wisdom is so important in this life. Because when it's too late, and all that wisdom is gone. Make sure you make use of it. And I'm going to say something that may seem a little out of character for this quiet, reserved little guy from Brooklyn that I am. But I'm going to say what I say every week. Get somebody you know today. Get them in a big bear hug. Tell them you love them. Tell them you love them. It may be the only time they hear those words. And I'm quite sure God loves them also. So, Jay, you know what I'm going to say to you. I love you, brother. I love you. I love what you're doing. I love who you are and what you represent. God bless you always.
Well, when I grow up, I want to be like you. So love you too, brother. Thanks for doing what you're doing and keep encouraging people.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my publicist will be remiss if I don't say this. The book is called To Every Page is Turning. You can get it on Amazon.com. It's a great read, I guarantee you. It's full of emotion and experiences that are pretty much my life, being born in the early 1940s and going through the 20th century and Vietnam War and all the changes and all the searching for God and all the redemption and all the things that happen in a person's life. To Every Page is Turning. Get it while they're still around. It's in the third printing already. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Jay, thank you for being on our show. You're really an inspiration. You really are.
My pleasure.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Carl.
much.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.